What is up, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of Father Dynasty. I'm your fatherly host, Chew, here in the manhole, here to talk a little fatherhood and a little Dynasty fantasy football. And Dynasty fantasy football, indeed, we've got the frequent flyer on Father Dynasty Airlines. And some people have a partner in crime. He is my partner in trades. Yes, I'm talking about Jacob Ridgway. Jake, how are you doing, buddy?
Brother, we are at cruising altitude this evening, so sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight. I'll tell you that we are kicking off spring break down here in Charlotte. Katie and I are on spring break from Charlotte school system, so certainly pumped up about that. And we are about 2/3 away from the end of the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so as soon as I finish with you here, I think we're going to go back and check out Black Widow.
We'll get ready to blast off. And what better to start that off than talk about a little Dynasty trade strategy? And we'll talk about the State of the Degenerates, which is the League of Extraordinary Degenerates, as you know. So as you and I are both very well versed in trades in Dynasty fantasy football, and they happen year round, I would say we do it more than anyone. I can comfortably say that more than anyone. And that's the only way it should be. But aside from myself, when you're looking for the ideal trade partner, I'm sure every trade kind of comes together in the right way, but is it you kind of have that tight-knit group of like, I know for a fact I can go to these three people, or is it truly just if you have a need or you want to get rid of someone, you simply just kind of throw any feeler you possibly can out? How do you kind of centralize it? Like, what do you do?
I have two key factors, patience and rapport. So if I'm playing the long game on something, I will take some time and start to, I will share an idea with someone and gather, to see if they're at all interested. And if not, then I pull back immediately. But if they are interested, I just kind of, chip away until we chop the tree down. So I'll check in with them every few days. If I've sent an offer or say, hey, are you still interested in Ezekiel Elliott for pick number 9? And work off of that. And then, a couple of days later, check in again. Maybe a week goes by and they either accept or they don't. But at that point in time, I've made far enough of an inroad to where they're going to say yes. I think the big key in those instances is just knowing your audience. And so know how much is too much to check in. Like, is it every other day or is it, once a week? And for me, it's typically about once a week because a lot of people aren't as invested as us, especially in the off season. And it's just knowing that and respecting that about them, because it's not that they don't want to participate. It's just that they're just not as passionate about it as we are. And so I think that, again, having that rapport with your league mate is the other big part. So it's patience and then rapport. So if I just want to get something done, like I'll hit you or Mike up or Tyler, because those are people that are invested almost on a year-round basis. And that's somebody that you can probably get an answer from day of, or at least a yay or nay, I'm interested type of thing. But I do think that a lot of challenge in dynasties especially, and I'll wrap this point up quickly, is just that people, they're not invested all the time, and that's okay. That's part of it. But if you're not invested all the time, you're probably not going to make the dedicated effort towards your team year round. So it's going to be harder to your entire team to stay relevant. And so if you're building rapport with other league mates, that is what keeps you relevant in my mind. And people that don't, I think, often find time that their trade partners are limited to 2 or 3 people in the league. Whereas I feel like I could tonight start a trade conversation with 8 of the 9 people in our league pretty comfortably. It may take some time, but I think if we really wanted to, we could get something done. But I think a lot of that is based on rapport. I had one other person tell me in another league that I'm in that said, hey, man, you have way better relationships and partnerships with these people and get something done. Like, I just don't know these people, and so therefore I can't get something done. And that's not true. I mean, it's about the effort. If you want to put in the effort to get to know somebody, you make it happen. Ask about their wife, their kids, their family, what's going on day to day outside of football. It's getting to know somebody, and if you really want to get a deal done. Maybe that's going a little too in depth and too serious, but I also just like people, and so maybe it's more about more than fantasy football at that extent.
I mean, I love that answer. First of all, I like that you can kind of boil it down to two factors, but it really comes down to relationships. And again, I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be it's a 10-team league and it's 10 best friends that they talk every single day and independent of Dynasty fantasy football. So it's a very good point that it's, everyone has different stuff going on in their lives. It could be half the league takes it incredibly seriously. One or two people take it too seriously. But it's interesting to look at it that way and say it's kind of like viewing it as like a salesperson, but a salesperson that maybe cares. So it's not like you're just looking to kind of just get the transaction done, which is certainly a piece of it. But even if you're trying to win the trade, which it's kind of tough to determine if you're going to win or lose it, because you could win it today and next week they could be injured and you lost it. So,
right.
But you want to have an amicable trade each time as much as you possibly can, because certainly if you do have injuries or in a tough spot down the road and you do need a trade partner, if you're burning bridges, I mean, unless you have a lot of attrition in the league, which is probably not a good thing, you're probably going to run into those owners a number of other times. So as much as you would like to beat them every single time you play them, if you beat them knowing that you beat them at their own game, so to speak, and kind of outwitting them with transactions, and I mean, even if each person wins with each trade in some way, that you're bettering your own team and kind of looking towards next year and the year after that with picks or with age of certain players, that sort of thing. So I love that answer, Jake. I really appreciate that.
Well said. Well said by you.
Thank you. Let's see. And you kind of talked about it a little bit, but so I guess when a trade originates, do you feel like you're more so just reacting to it's a position of need, saying, I need a running back currently. I know that, I have a couple that are aging, or is it more so I have this guy based on some news, I just need to get him off the roster. And I really think that, I could get a little bit for him now, because I think if I wait another month or two, I think he's basically unmovable. Is it just, you just adapt to whatever you need to do to better your roster?
I think the answer you're looking for is yes. In terms, I'll give you two examples. One is currently I have 4 picks in our upcoming Dynasty draft, which will take place shortly after the NFL draft later this month. And in my mind, as of today, what I know about the NFL and current rosters is that I will have 4 open Dynasty spots on our 28-person teams. And so with that, I have 4 picks in the top 20 because I have made moves to accommodate my need. And my need is running back. And so I'm going to take probably 3 of those 4 picks are going to be running back, irregardless of the value of those picks. I just want to be able to take the best running backs off the board as long as it makes sense. And so I think I have to take advantage of what you need, because I have 3 strong running backs and then it falls off the table entirely. And I feel like my tight ends, my wide receivers, and quarterback rooms, so to speak, are strong enough to continue to compete. And so I have to take advantage of the draft, because I don't want to trade any of the capital that I have in other areas of my roster. Well, if I've made that choice, that's fine, but then you've got to draft, and you better draft well. And that's the choice that I've made. In regards to players, you're like, I just hit you the other day on Jamal Williams, former Green Bay running back, and had a decent year as the backup to DeAndre Swift in Detroit this year. He's 27, and I love Jamal. I think he's a capable running back, and he's certainly funny to listen to in his interviews. So he's certainly a likable person in multiple aspects. But even in your case with you traded me Ronald Jones, and because I have interest and you might not have as much, and it's all on perceived value. But at the same time, sometimes you look at a player, and I might value Adam Thielen at 31 or 32 years old for the next 3 or 4 years. You might look at him and say, he's got 1 or no years left, so I have zero interest. And so if a player is aging, I do at times try to get out a year early. And I think that's always a personal memento, because sometimes it's a year or 2 early, or sometimes it's right on time. It's like anything, it's a gamble. It's just like choosing to start or not to start a player week to week. It's a gamble. And sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't.
That's a good point. And before I guess, fully grasped and understood, trading future picks and what they mean, and looking at when players for each position, generally speaking, kind of drop off, so to speak, I kind of had done a similar thing. It was either in the first season or maybe early into the second season of our league, which I think would have been 2019 was the second season. I traded away Julio Jones and ended up working out within a year and a half that he I don't think he's done necessarily, but he's not the Julio that he used to be. So it's those sorts of things where you can believe in someone that they can continue to produce at the level they do. Just a month or two ago, from one of our league mates, Tyler, had traded to get Christian McCaffrey, and it's kind of understanding that he's played 13 games in the last 2 seasons. But aside from being a Panthers fan, as you can see my Steve Smith jersey back here, but when you have a healthy Christian McCaffrey, even if he doesn't have 99% snap share, he's better than arguably anyone else, or he's at a worse top 5 if he can truly stay healthy and be utilized in a way that any offensive coordinator I feel like can use him. So it's those kinds of picks where it's like, you take that risk and you get those big boom bust players, but you also have to kind of build out the rest of your roster as best you possibly can.
Yeah,
but
I wholeheartedly agree there.
Yeah. And this will be the last thing on the trade strategy before we get into the state of the degenerates. And that is, do you have a preference if it's going to be a trade picks only, players only? Do you like to mix the two in? Do you have a preference yourself, or is it just whatever tickles your fancy that day?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, again, it's based on need. I think with the draft coming up, that's very topical. It's top of mind to get picks, because you may say in September that you don't care about your upcoming year's draft picks, but when it comes draft time the following year, say a month or 2 out, you start to get the itch of like, okay, I've definitely picked up on a couple of prospects. Say it's George Pickens out of Georgia, for example, that he could go anywhere from late round 1 in the NFL draft to round 3. You're like, I've got the number 12 pick in Dynasty, and maybe he goes at 9. Maybe I need to get up a little bit closer to 1 to make sure that I get my guy, so to speak. So I think it depends on time of the year, partially, this to see what you want to be invested in. But a lot of times, again, it's based on need. And when you look at, I think, quarterbacks, especially in a super flex, people want to make moves for quarterbacks or to draft quarterbacks. So it just depends on how you feel about your roster and the direction you think it's headed. Because if I have an aging roster, maybe I'm looking to sell assets for picks, which is obvious. Or maybe if I've got a pretty decent roster and I've got a first and second round pick, maybe I'm willing to send that to you for, like you said, Christian McCaffrey. Maybe it takes a little more than that, but you get what I'm saying, because I'm ready to compete now and you're not. And that oftentimes in dynasties, the last point I'll make to you is it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to finish 5th in your dynasty if you have a 14 playoff. It does not matter outside of your draft pick the following year, which maybe it does make a difference between 5 and 9 or 1, but at the same time, if you don't make the playoffs, you don't make the playoffs. And at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do. So if you're 5th, you might as well be 12th or 10th or 14th, however many teams in your dynasty. Just go ahead and finish last, unless there's like some god-awful punishment for finishing last, which we actually don't have in our league. But yeah, I think that was the last thing that I would mention, is that if you're not going to compete, or you have injuries to the point where just tank it out. And I know our commissioner is anti-tank, and I just go back and forth of how I feel about that, because I think he makes valid points. And I'm not here to say that he's wrong. I'm just here to say that I'm glad I don't have to make that decision.
And that's thank you for bringing that up, by the way. I mean, I myself am anti-tank, and this is someone who just was last place in 2021. More of kind of like an accepted point suppression is what I'm going to call it. I mean, because I understood. I mean, I got guys like Cam Akers, I got Deshaun Watson, DJ Chark once he went down. So, I mean, there's a number of players where, if it's producing or aging players, that I was perfectly okay trading them for a younger player that by no means is it a guarantee that they're going to be on the team they're currently on. DJ Chark, for example, went to the Lions on a 1-year deal. But with the hopes that, one, they can be relevant for twice or 3 times as long as the player I traded to get him. But also with the hope that they can come back and maybe reach that perceived ceiling that they have versus the player that I traded to get that person that they've likely their ceiling was 2, 3, 4 years ago. So I, in my opinion, I know it's kind of like, if I have a couple top 10 players at each position, but half of them are injured, and the ones I do have, I'm just going to bench them for Sam Darnold and Ronald Jones or whatever, just for the sake of getting the smallest amount of points I can. Like, I know there's a fine line between the two, but yeah, I guess what was the one way I've heard to deter that is doing like the tiebreaker. I guess aside from like the playoff teams, the ones that don't make the playoffs is like the most points available or like most points possible. I want to say is a way to kind of deter that. But again, yeah, it all depends on what does the league agree on, and I mean, what is ever a problem necessarily. But enough politics here. We'll leave that for another day. But actually, we'll get into politics because if we're looking at the state of the degenerates, that is indeed politics there. So
that day is today, then.
That is today. So we're right back into politics, and it is talking about the League of Extraordinary Degenerates. That is one of the leagues that we are in. I may be joining another one that you might be a part of. We'll see if that happens or not. And with 4 seasons in the books, we'll be starting our 5th year in 2022. What are your thoughts on the state of the league? Do you think there's enough parity? Do you think there's clear tiers, maybe setting different teams apart? Have you maybe enjoyed your time in the league, and you think it's going to be good going forward?
I think it's a very interesting question. It's more of a concept than a question. I think in any league, you certainly have tiers of investment, and we talked about that maybe 10 minutes ago. But I really see our league in particular, without going too inside baseball, as we have a 4-team playoff, and it's week to week, so it's single, like it's weekly elimination. It's not like it's where you have like the double, like where you would face your opponent week 16 and 17, and then the final would be 18 and 19 or whatever, or 17 and 18. I can't think, but I think that's huge. And really, Chew, I think that it's really a 3-person league as far as being able to compete for a championship right now. I think that every single team, all 10 teams, have a strong starting lineup, a lineup in which they could compete for a championship every single week, not factoring in buys, not factoring in suspensions, definitely not counting impact of injuries that are extensive, sometimes even season ending. And I think the league is really lacking depth. And so I look at it as like there's a core that has a chance to win for, say, the next 2 years of 3 teams. And I think there's probably 4 teams that need a strong draft and probably should make a move or two to be really competitive this year. And I think there are a couple of teams there at the bottom that, frankly, I'd be concerned that if they didn't drop, like I'd be concerned that they might drop out of the league in the next couple of years, because they might have had an initial good year because they drafted a little older, a little more veteran, because they didn't really understand the dynasty concept or the superflex concept from a draft to draft standpoint as far as drafting quarterbacks. And I have some concerns about that they might drop off. But that's something that, time will tell, as our commissioner Tyler Daly likes to tell me oftentimes. And it's a true piece of advice, as cliche as it sounds, because as much as I love our league, I think you and I have talked, it would be nice to have a little more investment. At the same time, I think that I myself have 2 jobs, a master's program, and oh, by the way, I have a lovely girlfriend downstairs who would love to spend more quality time with me, I hope. And so maybe I'm not as invested as I used to be or could be at times. But I think, if it's important to you, you carve out those few minutes and you can make it important. In my diatribe, I'm just trying to say that I think this team can be more of a 7 or 8 team league if people just had a tiny bit more investment in it, even from August to January, not even year round. And that's what I'm hopeful for moving forward.
I like that. I mean, that's better than I could have even dreamed as a state of the league. And I think that's pretty accurate in the sense of, I'm sure every league is this way. If you have at least, we've had no turnover in terms of owners since we started the league in 2018.
Yeah,
so
right.
I know that's certainly a good thing. But like you said, even without anyone coming in or out of the league, there is kind of a different set of, after you get a couple years into the league, you get past that initial draft, you get through a couple of rookie drafts where even if you follow the science, so to speak, in terms of a lot of the draft gurus, you could pick a bunch of lemons. And I mean, you after you have a good startup draft, but you have 3-4 years of tough rookie drafts, a couple injuries, a couple of players that don't pan out, you're in a pretty shitty spot, and you certainly have to be invested enough to make those trades, savvy trades, and kind of work to either make it all happen now, kick the can down the road, and work to build the strongest team possible. And I know, as I've mentioned to you before, I'm going to create a rebuild trilogy that's going to be talking about the various stages of the rebuild that I'm currently, hopefully, on the back end of. We'll find out. If I get a bunch of injuries, I'm probably fucked, if I'm being completely honest. But all or nothing, baby. But yeah, I think one thing I can round it out here. So this could be where you see yourself finishing. There's maybe where you, if you have in your mind, maybe a rank of 1 to 10, or who you think maybe would be last. Do you have any bold or ice cold takes for this 2022 season? And this is, of course, before we've had a rookie draft or any other trade, so things could change certainly. But anything that's on your mind right now?
Well, just to go back to your previous point about the status of the league, if you will, and in that sort of bottom tier, as one league mate put it, and I quote, "I am bereft of talent," and that's not a place that you want to be, my friend. But anyway, to your current question, I do believe that I'm one of the top 3 teams. Now, it could be catastrophic, and there could be a lot of injuries, but I feel strong with my quarterbacks. I feel strong with the even the defenses. The kicker, I have Justin Tucker. He's always one of the top 3 kickers in the league, if not the very best. I mean, our receiver room's as strong as it could possibly be between Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin, let's see, Adam Thielen, Juju Smith-Schuster, who's now with the Kansas City Chiefs. Will be interesting to see what he does there. And I'm drawing a blank. I know I have a couple of others, which is terrible to say.
You got Debo off me before in the last offseason, I believe. I think he was coming off that injury, if I remember correctly.
My guy Debo. Even league winner Michael Laughlin said punt on Debo. He's injury prone.
Is that right? Yeah.
He said punt, and I said, I'm invested because when he's healthy, he's the man. And
that guy's a weapon. Honestly, he might be able to punt too. I wouldn't rule it out. That's what he was saying. He's like, punt, get him to punt, get him on the punt team. Yeah.
He can do everything. You said it.
Yep.
So it was tough losing to Mike this year. Mike's one of my best friends, and he beat me in the championship. I really wanted it. I was invested this past year, and I think I definitely had to take some time off before I reinvested myself in Dynasty, and I'm back. But I definitely needed like 2 months to cool off there because it stunk. I mean, it's not necessarily about the money. It's a pride thing for us, because I think that he's got 5 to my 3 total now as far as like overall dynasties that we're both a part of. And so I think that we've both been major football fans since, the day we knew each other. It's one of the reasons we bonded. So it's really a back and forth that I hope will go on for many years, and hopefully I will eventually take the lead on.
Well, Jake, I can certainly say that you are a formidable opponent, and I would say you got this. I don't know if Mike's listening to this, so you're going down.
I hope.
Absolutely. And I know you've got a lovely date with Katie Feeney Go Team, and far be it from me to stand in your way. So what I would like to say is, Jake, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you for talking Dynasty trade strategy, which is something that is tough to boil down into so many words. And I thank you for those words. And thank you for letting me know your perceived state of the Degenerates, as it's good to know what I'm getting into, what you're getting into before we go and spend a little bit of money on these buy-ins here. So I do want to leave you with the last word. So Jake, any plugs, any parting words, general advice, favorite quote? What do you got for me?
Yeah, I would just tell you one particular quote, and that is, don't let a lack of planning on your end constitute an emergency on mine. And I don't say that to you. It's a proverbial you, because today when I was in the car rider line, so I announced the car riders, and there's probably like 300 car riders in this 1,000-person elementary school in Charlotte that I work at. And it's 2:58, and we're going into spring break here, mind you. And the car rider line opens up at 2:25. So we've been going for a good half hour here. And, everybody's in a good mood. It's pleasant. It's spring break. Everybody's pants around their ankles, ready to just take off towards the playground. It's great. I think the interesting piece, and the reason I bring up that quote is that it was one of the last cars. And it was like a brand new, like blacked out, like tinted windows Land Rover. And I knew that like it's got like they put a piece of paper in the window, said this is the student, and I just announced the student's name and their number, and they move forward in the line. And I announced the number and the name, and I realized a couple of minutes later, as there's only 3 cars behind this car, and they're just waiting for the line to file out in front of them, that there was actually an odd number of cars in the line. And so I thought there was an opportunity for this individual to move over and actually to get in line, to get their child sooner rather than later, had they stayed in the lane that they were in, because there's 2 lanes. And I went over to apologize to this person because I had asked them to move, thinking that they were going to get in sooner in the other lane. I'd made a mistake. I've been doing this for a few months, and occasionally you say a wrong name or something like this happens. I made a mistake, and I went over to apologize to what I thought would be just a jovial parent about to head on the spring break. They rolled down the window, and I said, hey, I would just like to apologize. And before I could finish, the person said, we're going to be late because of you. And I said, I'm so sorry. That it was just just a common mistake. That was an honest mistake. I'm terribly sorry. It didn't mean anything by it. It certainly wasn't intentional. And the person looked at me and said, no, like, you made this mistake, and now my child is going to be the last picked up because of you. And it took every bit of me to not say, hey, don't let a lack of planning on your end constitute an emergency on mine. Because if your appointment's at 3:15, why are you showing up at 2:58 when you could pick up your child as early as 2:25? I cost you maybe 60 to 90 seconds of your entire day. And I tried to apologize for it. And this person was not having it. And as I was saying, I was going to say, I hope you have a blessed and wonderful spring break. I got I hope out. I got the words I hope out. And the person started rolling up the window. So it was a little like, got it.
Unbelievable.
So I leave you with that Shakespearean tragedy to finish off our podcast here.
Jake, that was well said. You held yourself together better than Chris Rock did. That's composure that you had, and I respect you for it.
It was hard not to go Will Smith on this person, if you will.
I understand. No. Sometimes you got to do it, apparently.
Hey, man, had a blast.
Thank you very much, Jake, and hey, you have a good night.
Likewise. Enjoy the weekend.
You too, buddy.
Peace, brother.